well, she punched me first. And then she says, well, he called me a jerk. And then he says, well, she took my stuffed animal. And she says, well, he made a face at me. And do you know what's going on there? They're focusing on what's true. They're focusing on what actually happened. Take an adult. And they're tussling with each other, wrestling verbally. And you come into the room and you say, what happened? And she says, he's an idiot. And he says, she never, ever listens to me. And she says, yeah, well, your mother hates my guts. And, well, that might be true. And then he says, you know, and they go back and forth about this stuff that has absolutely no bearing in actual reality. It's just emotions flooding into the situation. And so for some reason, when we're parents, we can look at our kids and say, no, let's get to the bottom of what actually happened. But when we're in a relationship among adults, we seem to think that, okay, we don't need to pay attention to true things anymore. We get to pay attention to the fact that I hate your guts, and that you make me sick, and that I can't stand to look at you. That's the stuff we pay attention to. And I'm just saying, no, we got to get back to what's clearly true. And so, as an adult, this is what's clearly true for you. Something happened outside of you, and something happened inside of you. Very simple. When something happened outside of you, something happened inside of you, that's what you say. When you dropped the anvil on my foot, I felt unloved. You know, something along those lines. Something happened outside of you, something happened inside of you. Those things are true things. They happened. Verbalize them. Let that be the foundation of where you start from. This is plain and simple, kind of straightforward stuff. If you need any more help with this, talk to John Poston. He's getting a PhD in it all. And so if I say anything wrong, you can go up and talk to him and he'll correct it. But I'm going to move on to the next one, okay? So the first one is focus on what's clearly true, not the emotional wildness that happens in relationships. Then next, identify the real needs. Something's going on in this family that's touching on a need. If there's a conflict, that means someone feels like there's a need that isn't being met. If there's a relationship that is breaking down, that means one of the people feels that there's a need that hasn't been met. Now, I think a lot of these problems can be solved if we're getting all of our needs met in God, like we talked about last week. But the brass tacks are that every now and then there will be conflicts because one person has a need that the other person isn't meeting appropriately, and there's some type of problem there. So we got to somehow identify what is the need. Well, the need is that the little girl doesn't want her brother to make nasty faces at her. She needs to feel like he cares about her. Okay, that's a need. And for the adults, he needs to feel like she pays attention to him or whatever. Identify the real need, and then once you've identified the need, this is the hard part, but it's the wonderful part. You can apply family grace to that need. The only way I can really describe this is to share with you my own personal story a little bit. A few years ago, we were up in Chicago, and some things were going on in my life that were not happy. And I was pretty angry all the time. I was frustrated, I was mad, and I was just like, ready to snap and bite people's heads off at just about anything that happened. At the same time, I had very young children, and I was still trying to learn what it meant to be a father, what it meant to be a dad. And there were some confusing things about that, because I grew up in a household where my parents spanked my sister and I. And my wife grew up in a household where they didn't. In fact, she was kind of afraid of her dad that he might someday hit her, even though he never actually did. Just kind of the way she perceived him at the time. And so I was just kind of on edge. I was just kind of angry. I was just kind of mad. And I was snapping at the kids. And my daughter was really just absolutely just annoying the snot out of me, because she would cry uncontrollably. She was like 1 or 2, and she would cry uncontrollably for just no end, and it would just go on and on and on, and I just wanted to punish her and lock her up in a closet or something. Well, the problem was that my wife, who is here today and loves me to pieces because I'm the best guy who's ever been in her life, she began to lose a sense of trust in me that I was safe with the kids. I was angry all the time, and the daughter was annoying me, and I was kind of snapping at them. And so my wife began to kind of lose trust in me. And she expressed that to me a few times. I don't trust you with the kids, or something like that. That's the way I heard it. And I felt so defeated as a guy and as a dad that I just checked out. For about a month, I barely spoke to the kids. I barely spoke to my wife. We just kind of went through the motions of our life. And it just went, and I was just kind of checked out, trying to regain some type of composure. It felt like about a month to me. I don't even know. Well, she ended up going to counseling. And one of those days, she brought me with her. And I was like, I don't want to go see a counselor. I'm a pastor. I don't need that. So I went to the counselor. We sat down together. And in that meeting, something came up where I heard her tell a story about some of the ways she felt about her dad and how much she loved him, and how there was this one moment where she had a sense that when I checked out, it felt to her as if her dad had checked out. And that something clicked in there on an emotional level with her. And I'm not saying anything about her. I'm saying it because of me. When I heard her say those words, a light bulb clicked in my head. And I realized I have not been loving. And now I know how to apply grace. And now I know how to love. And I've got to work through my own issues some other way. But I now can apply some grace into this relationship. The conflict in the situation was largely my own fault because of my building anger. And I had to go through this kind of process to have my ears opened wide enough for me to hear how grace could be applied. You are going to face conflict in your life. You're going to face conflict in your marriage. You're going to face conflict in your family. You're going to face conflict. And if you do not deal with the conflict on the level of grace and truth, then you will continue to be in that conflict. And you'll find yourself either running from conflict after conflict after conflict, or you'll find yourself miserable. The other option, of course, is to deal with it. Find the truth. Find the need. And I believe with all that's in me that God will give you the power to show grace to the person in need.